hope you enjoy this. This is the modules Node.js bootcamp webinar series. Presenting myself is David Mark Clements, and I'm joined with Luca Maraschi. So my name's Dave. I've been working with Node since version 0.4. I started with JavaScript in 1997. Lead trainer for NearForm, written a book about Node. It's called Node Cookbook. Myself and Luca, we're both Tiger Team consultants. That's a specialist sort of SWAT team department of NearForm. I'm joined by Luca, who's an exceptional architect, programmer, and speaker. Luca, you've been involved since around Node 0.4 too, right?
Oh yeah, I all first, and yeah, from 0.4 running production from 2012, especially in enterprise solutions and especially large-scale distributed system.
Very cool, very cool. 0.4 in production. That's some tight stuff right there.
Long time ago, a lot of fun.
So this is, as I said, this is the bootcamp series. This is the first in a series of talks we'll be doing for free, so stay tuned on the Twitters and the Google Tubes and whatnot for more as they come. We've also just mentioned NearForm there a few times. This is the company myself and Luca both work for, who's hosting this talk. NearForm began building systems as well in the early days of Node, again 0.4, again in production, which was pretty crazy back then. We've grown massively since. In particular, we provide a variety of training and consultancy with quite a few different organizations. The ones we can mention include people like Net-a-Porter, News UK, Condé Nast. We're also big advocates of open source, particularly the Tiger team. We like building tools that make systems faster, make developers' lives easier. A couple of tools that I want to shout out: Pinot, 0x, which is for Flamegraphs, Autopsy, stuff like that. We also have core contributors in our team, and we're members of Node core working groups as well, like Diagnosis Group and Streams Group, so on and so forth. Okay, enough about us. Let's just do a real quick piece of housekeeping, and we'll get right into it. So this is a 30-minute presentation with a 10-minute Q&A, total of 40 minutes for the session. Please, if you have any questions, hit us up on Twitter with the Ask NearForm hashtag, or ping myself or Luca publicly. Just add us on that. Or there's also, you can submit questions via GoToWebinar. I think third from the bottom, there's a panel that says questions. Add any questions there. So any questions you have, if they just pop into your head, slam them in the box there. And yeah, we'll pick them up at the end. Hopefully we'll get through them all, but we'll certainly try to address as many as we can. Okay, so this is a session about modules. So, Luca, what is a module?
Well, so I think the easiest way to describe module is just to think about Lego. I think everybody got passionate about playing Lego, younger or older people. And if you think actually about the construction that you see in most of the Lego boxes, that's actually your application at the end of the day. And every single Lego brick is just one of these tiny modules that they make it possible. And every module, every brick, is just a reusable component if you look inside of your construction. And if you think a little bit broader, that kind of a 4x2 famous Lego brick makes it possible to build almost an infinite amount of different constructions. So we all are acquainted with Node, and we know that basically Node is based on a principle of isolation, right? The isolation model is what rules actually Node, single process. And I think the best way that this principle was empowered was actually thanks to modules. So do one thing and do it extremely well. If you think it's just a very simple principle that is very, very complicated to put in practice. And module, actually, they are nothing new, right? We all more or less got in touch with Ruby gems, and we felt the pain. .NET with the DLLs, and the mystery of is my DLL running locally or in the GUC, and which one wins against the other. And I mean, for me, Maven was just a nightmare. So more or less, we all got in touch with different kind of modules in different kind of flavors, in different kind of compilation. And I don't know, you too, right, Dave? You played a lot with different other languages, and I think, do you remember Ruby's
Well,
or?
yeah, I mean, upgrading a Linux server even can be a nightmare. You know, the apt-get
Oh,
dependency hell.
OMG. And yeah, I think actually Node was introducing kind of a huge revolution in terms of dependency management. And don't you think so? I mean, the dependency hell, I think we can all forget about the hell of upgrading Ruby from version 1.9 to version 2.0, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, Node's really solved a problem here, and I think this is part of the success of Node. And really, it's Node, but it's recognizing something about JavaScript that's really contributed to that success and facilitated things along particularly in the early days. Um, there's a particular type of dependency hell, and it's in my opinion the worst type of dependency hell. When you have two sub-dependencies of the same package but of a different version of each package, um, and they're in conflict because say there's a package called foo, and it has a version 1 and a 2. You have bar and baz both depending on foo in the same process, and they're in conflict. And some languages, some platforms, they can't resolve that conflict, whether it's global namespacing or whatever. But because of the dynamic nature of JavaScript and the first class nature of JavaScript functions, Node was able to leverage the power of the language to solve this problem, even when the language didn't have a module system specified. And in a way, it's arguable that actually the lack of module system in JavaScript actually allowed through timing and to a degree serendipity, but also through the ingenuity of the actual language itself, as it derives from languages like Self, Scheme, and Lisp, to actually provide that power in raw form through the language. So essentially, what Node does is it loads the file from the file system, wraps it in a function, and then calls that function, right? So when you require one module from within another module, all you're doing is calling a function. And so it doesn't matter if it's different versions of a module or even the same module. Technically, you could load the same exact module twice and have no problems, as long as you follow best practices like no shared state and stuff. But we'll talk about that more a bit later. The other thing that played into it at the time was CommonJS. So CommonJS was a sort of organized effort into trying to define approaches that worked for JavaScript outside of the browser. So one of the main qualities of CommonJS modularity was synchronously requiring a module. In other words, blocking the event loop, stopping anything from happening until that dependency is required. This often is exactly the wrong thing to do, blocking the event loop, but in this particular case, it's exactly the right thing to do, because you want to get all of your dependencies in your process before you do anything asynchronous. And it avoids a lot of boilerplate. If you've used AMD in the browser, you know what I'm talking about. Adding callback functions for when the module is resolved and all that kind of stuff. So the convergence of these different things sort of played into a module system that avoids some of the major issues that have plagued other languages and other platforms. So when it comes down to it, though, this approach, particularly when coupled with the prevailing Unix philosophy in the community, leads to small modules, and small modules means lots of modules, and lots of modules means deep dependency trees. And so what happened again in the early days of Node was a sort of arms race for a package manager for Node, and I guess we all know who won, right, Luca?
Yeah, well, like Apple someone said there is a NEP for everything. I think actually NPM made the same philosophy available at the Node world, right? At the hands of every developer. And especially made extremely happy through its distribution model, extremely happy the enterprise and people that they want to stay cost efficient, right? So don't reinvent the wheel, just reuse what is around and make the power of how to compose all this module together and give it a business meaning. NPM actually is, there's a lot of misunderstanding around what really NPM is, and there are you need to distinguish actually the difference between NPM as a tool and NPM as a registry, right? So NPM actually was, I think, the best way to bring the ease of management and the ease of distribution in the hands of everybody, right? So you just go, how many times did you spend more time actually looking for a package than actually to install it, right? So because installation is very simple, npm install package name and is done, available to be used into your app. Just require it and you can use it. And I think on the other hand, the npm, the way to distribute, so npm publish was also extremely easy, right? npm publish, correct configuration in your package.json, and you are live. Everybody can use your module, which actually introduced a lot of also kind of problems, right? Because as the ease of publish brings also the ease of unpublish, right? And that's why I think one of the best practices and best thing to do once that you basically enter your deployment street is to npm shrink wrap, right? So you npm shrink wrap, all your dependency tree is snapshot, is written in a beautiful npm shrink wrap file, and once that you call npm install again in your application, all the dependency basically they're going to be locked and basically download and install as they were basically snapshot. And so because a lot of people they still misunderstand the use of semver in the semver notation in the package.json, right? How many times did you see just a star instead of having a strict version, right? And how many times? I mean, we all know what happened with LeftPad, right? It was a fun story, but it also brings up a problem that basically still keeps part of the enterprise really skeptical on the value of Node as an enterprise tool, right? But it's all about on how you basically approach this problem using the correct tools and the correct workflow. So
in a way, I guess. Sorry, you go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was just saying that, if you look, for example, where compliance enters in place, right? Like banks, insurances, and where the process of approving software is pretty complicated. That's actually where I think Node is getting the most resistance from. And security is getting an issue then, right? And that's why you need basically to continuously audit your packages, not use obsolete packages. And once again, I think locking the dependency is a way that you can basically keep safe that your dependency tree is not going to get messed up by new dependency, new packages released. And, if you think about tools like Audit.js, they are going to make this process a little bit flawless, and they ensure basically the security, a little bit and more resilience, right, in your dependency. That's, I think, the big advantage of it. But yeah, there are a lot of also trade-off, and one of these trade-off is definitely security and more manageability in terms of your security. Your packages, they are not sandbox, but they are just open source distribute, right? They're not compiled, so a lot of things
on top of that, there's the burden of discovery. Like, there's a lot of dead code on npm, and dealing with that is an issue. So in a way, the ease of publishing really helped get Node off the ground and on its feet, and get people involved and get the community involved. But we're now at kind of almost like a tipping point where we have to figure out how do we keep this easy, but how do we make it secure, and how do we help discovery?
Correct, exactly. The enterprise proof software, right? That's what's missing right now. So like you just said, the ease of publishing may dig a little bit a hole in Enterprise for Node, but there are different kind of solutions that I think nowadays they're available, right? Like I just said, Node.js is a way just to keep an eye on security issues that on your packages, right? npm shrink wrap is another way to basically just snapshot and create a state and lock the state of your application. So that's actually definitely
And I mean,
something
the
interesting.
rest is where the power of sort of like an analogy of word of mouth comes in, where you use modules from people that you trust, you use modules that are recommended to you by people you trust, or other packages that are using modules, so you can see who's depending on this module, how many downloads, that sort of thing,
Yeah,
and
like
using essentially the same old sort of social sort of um, uh, analysis that we use in our everyday lives.
absolutely. I mean, the referral is just how things that become used and propagated everywhere. And definitely, I mean, I completely agree with you. It's just the way it goes. And npm stats, for example, is a great way to basically keep looking into the overall life trend of a package, so you can see how popular it became or how unpopular it turned to be.
That's
Um,
npm-stats.com, I think, isn't it?
yeah, yeah, correct,
Yeah.
exactly. That's a place that that's something that you want to bookmark, right? If it takes more than 30 seconds to decide which package to use, just go there and make some BI and just check the history of a package, and it is going to basically drive you into what you just said.
Mm.
But shall we just get some hands dirty on some code and see something moving and
Yeah. I love getting my hands dirty. So,
let's do
yeah.
it.
Demo time, in the words of MC Hammer. So let's take a look. I've got some pre-prepared stuff here. First, I want to sort of show what I was talking about by a module essentially just being a function. If I just comment out this smiley face guy here, we know that's going to throw. And if I just run that. So when that throws, we can actually see there's an extra piece of code here. You've probably seen this before if you've worked with Node any sort of period of time, and it sort of reveals a little bit of the internals. What actually happens when you load a module, or when you run a piece of code with Node as well, the same exact thing, is it wraps that module in a function, and then when that function is required, so we're requiring fs here, which is actually still a module, still a JavaScript module that's written, that's compiled in. What it will do is it will call this function, and it will create an exports object, pass it to it. It will create a require function, pass it to it. Then it will create an object with an exports property that points to the original exports object that's been created. That's important to note. And then it'll pass in a string for the file name and the dir name. And so then all of these things are actually local to the module. They're actually just parameters passed into a function, sort of implicitly available. So that's how a module is loaded, and that gives you several options of how you actually pull stuff out. So once require is called, obviously, say this is my mod right here. Once that's called, what it will return is the module.exports. It will take the module exports reference and give you that. So if we do something like exports.foo equals 1, then it's going to give me an object where foo is 1, and it's going to be that original exports object. The other option is module.exports equals foo1, and in that case you're actually overwriting the object. So now module.exports is not the same as exports. So that can be a bit confusing. What we recommend is actually just sticking with this module.export syntax. The only reason to not do that is in a circular dependency situation. but those should be avoided anyway. But if you absolutely have to resolve a circular dependency problem, one way to do that is actually to just, well, no, it doesn't even solve that, actually. It doesn't even solve that. Avoid circular dependencies. Let's take a look at the next one. So when you're exporting an object, even though I said you should maybe just export an object, mostly you want to sort of not do this. In this case, we have an object with sort of a simulated constant piece of state and a method, and then the method does something to the state and then returns the state. The problem is modules are cached when they're loaded in. So if we load this into two processes, say process A and process B, oh no, not process, but you know what I mean. If we apply this into two places in the process A and B, then what we're going to get is a shared module. So when we call that function in A, it's going to be 42, but then when we call it in B, it's going to be 84, but whichever order we do these in, at some point both of them are going to have 84 as their state. So that transcends the proper boundaries of modules. So a better way is to export a function, and this is most of the popular highly downloaded modules do this, and we would see this as a current best practice. Exporting a function, you basically get that encapsulation, and you'll be able to get a new instance each time. You'll be able to customize that instance through function inputs. It's essentially immutable. And now, in both of these cases, the state will be 42 instead of being shared. So essentially, the only times where you're going to really export an object is if it's to do with maybe configuration, or some exceptions, like say the likes of Lodash, which is a utility belt. But even then, sometimes I would say, well, if you have a function, if you have a module that does a couple of related things, then maybe what you want to do is treat the function that you're exporting as the object and have static methods on that as well, because functions are objects in JavaScript too, so you can get the best of both worlds. So this is your sort of init function, and then you have maybe a utility method or something. No, not that one. Takeaways are generally export a function, use the function to instantiate. One other thing that we would recommend against is exporting constructors from modules. This is pretty poor practice because it requires the use of new. You have to remember to use new, and you can't even see the code that you're calling because it's contained in a module. So if you forget new, that leads to all sorts of problems. And then on top of that, you have this sort of fractal API where you need to know the sort of the prototype methods, and it's the whole class kind of based programming thing. And in some other languages that have the right tooling and stuff, I would say that's probably okay. In JavaScript, I avoid classes and constructors like the plague. Hopefully we get a question about that so I can talk more about it later. Luca, you're going to take over at this point, aren't you? Because you have a couple of pet peeves about requiring, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think these three examples, they show what I mostly see during code review during our consultancy. And the first one actually being requiring inline and already calling methods on your required module, right? So I find it actually extremely unreadable, especially because if you have some kind of OCD in your code, having the required module dot whatever method you want to call, and then you have a callback inside. It's going to be pretty hard to read, right? I don't know, and for me it doesn't even look right. I would like actually to have var db equals require db.query, because then it's much, much easier to read. Another of the most common thing that I see is just the middleware pattern with a require. So, for example, Express being the easiest example to make here. When you try to use a middleware and have require the middleware inside of your application.use or whatever .use, it's kind of
Well,
like
that's a really tempting one, isn't it? App.use. It's a really tempting one to do that.
Extremely tempting. But it's like the forbidden fruit.
It's bad practice.
Yeah. And the other one actually is calling, instead of an asynchronous function, calling requiring a method, right? Like you said before, the event loop is not going to really like it. And most of the time I just see when you instantiate your HTTP server and in your handler, you just require a method inside. And also requiring a method inside of a function is pretty bad taste, right? You don't really like to do inline require. It's not so nice. Yeah, exactly. This one is how it would look actually a little bit cleaner, right? And it makes it also easier to read, to maintain. Especially, I don't want to have my call stack messed up with all the things that the require is doing, so I like it more in maybe in this way. Yeah, maybe I should npm search if not no idiot really exists. I think somebody already came out with this package.
So that fixes those, right?
Yeah, that's it. That's how it actually.
Except if they're all in the same file, they all need to be at the top of the file.
Correct. Yeah, and then put them at the top. So, and it's a little bit like .NET. You always import on top and not at the bottom.
Yeah.
So I think actually, if you look overall, during our gigs and everything, we see so many things, right, Dave? And one of the things that I'm always so surprised is the development workflow, and it's where most of the mistakes are usually done. So
organization.
Correct, yeah, and it's always the fight between development and production, and then you hit the enterprise. So one thing that is usually common is to symlink your node module folder, and I would say just don't do it. It's the recipe for disaster.
Oh, it's a nightmare.
It's a nightmare. It's a recipe for disaster. You never know what's going on into that symlink, and you never know if you're forgetting something. But it's actually not
modifying the node path in the environment variable.
Yeah, that one is just the. I mean, don't do it. Just don't do it. I mean, please don't do it. Don't change the node path. It's just like, why?
But why do people do? Why do projects do that?
I think actually because I think actually, for the ease of development, right? You develop different modules, you make modular your application, you want to get the code change everywhere without publishing a new version of the module over and over. But actually, npm already gives us a tool for that. It's called npm link. Very simple to use. You just go in your module, npm link it, and then you go into your application and npm link the module name. Done. You alter your module and automatically gets propagated, like if you were symlinking, but done in the right way, right? Because this module is put in the global scope of npm, and basically you can require it as it was a real published module. And another thing actually that npm gives us, I think, it's all the automation part with the post-install script, and it's great, in development. But then you go into production, and you are even in production in enterprise, which are two beasts to be treated really carefully, right? So the enterprise is mostly how can I secure and how can I release, how can I seal my production package, right? And we said already that there are different ways. but npm shrink wrap being a way to basically seal the dependency. But if I develop my own package and I want to distribute internally of my enterprise, I have two choices. Or either I go on private npm packages, which you definitely don't want to do something like that if you're working in a bank or insurance, policy and compliancy and legal, and especially because your business logic is your baby, is your real business value. So a lot of times you see basically enterprises deploying internal npm services, npm registry, sorry, like Sinopia or Artifactory. And that's actually I think the great answer to how can I use the power of npm still being compliant with my company rules. And having basically an npm, a private npm server might be a lot of manageability troubles bringing inside of your basic organization and normal workflow. But at the end, actually, is a great way if you want to basically, once again, don't reinvent the wheel also inside of your organization, which is, I think, a great win.
Right. So don't sacrifice production at the expense of development, but don't sacrifice development at the expense of production. There's a balance between the two, and there is a way forward, namely NPM link.
And there are solutions for that. So don't try one size fits all. It doesn't exist. You need to actually have different solutions for different problems.
Right. But moving on to the philosophical kind of finish. In terms of module systems, Node is or ecosystems, I should say. Node's ecosystem is sort of one of the most opinionated, and kind of flip-flop between different sort of opinions, but really kind of returns to this one prevailing opinion of very, very small modules. Can a module be too small, or how big is too big?
That's a pretty nice philosophical question. Well, I don't think there is an absolute
answer. It's a tricky question,
answer.
right?
Yeah, it's a tricky question. There's not an absolute answer. So, I did study physics, and at the time that I also studied Latin, there was this beautiful sentence, divide et impera, which is extremely powerful, and it basically kind of embrace a lot of actually physical rules and things that they happen even in our daily software job. So divide et impera means if you are able to divide and to simplify the problem at its simplest state, then you can control it and you can master it, which is fantastic, right? If you think we are trying to solve every kind of physical problem, going to this atomical existence more than looking into the entire matter. And I think so on is actually applicable in software, right? Too small, too big, it doesn't exist, right? Just if you can make it controllable and meaningful, then you can master it.
So it's kind of like Occam's razor, where you get to the smallest, as simple as it can be, but no simpler, and you're just taking responsibility down to its smallest area.
Correct. It's only a matter of responsibility, right? So don't build a library or don't build a module that does everything. Like, I mean, we all have an example, Express. Express is the clear example that it started doing everything, and they realized that to be actually usable and to be scalable, it had to be divided in sub-modules that I could decide either or not to use in my application. I think that's the clearest example. I mean, and too small. I mean, does it really make sense, a module with 3 lines of code? Yes. If it's really functional and useful, yes. But don't try to create this kind of million of micro modules, because then you enter into the manageability hell, right? And you can have a million of, you can literally have a million of NPM links around, but good luck managing them, right? So, and that's where the rule of common sense should actually enter in place. But to be honest, actually, if you look, it's not the only philosophical question that nowadays is going on in the Node community, right? Being both a collaborator and having basically the pleasure of reading all the issues that are coming up. There's another one that is insanely interesting, right? As philosophical
Yes.
as this one. ECMAScript 6 module. Take it or
Yes.
leave it. What is the answer
What
there?
is it? I think there is. When we were first preparing this, I was like, I don't think there's an answer yet. But I think since then, one has come up. So, what's the future? Is the future ES6 modules? Well, maybe we have an interoperability problem. If you look at that issue linked there, you can see that there is a huge conversation, and there's even me on there whinging, going, I don't want it like this. I want to just do my thing. I don't want to have to like think about file extensions or package JSON and so on and so forth. So what we have is we have two ways. We have two versions of a language, and we have two competing module systems or module syntax that necessarily require a different system. And ECMAScript 6, what it does, it introduces this concept called goals, right? Which is essentially an execution context. So you have a script goal, capital S, script goal, and a module goal, capital M. And this is kind of using the sort of the terminology of the browser. So you have when you load a script into the browser, that's a script, whereas a module is different. So the script goal is like ECMAScript 5 and below. You know, if you load a script into the browser, it executes in the global context. Now, Node veneers over the top of that with its little module loader where it wraps them in the functions as we've explored, but it's still following the rules of what ES6 describes as the script goal. So if you don't have the use strict string literal in there, then it's going to follow a certain set of rules. The module goal is its own encapsulated context. It doesn't need to be wrapped with a function. It's simply its own context. And on top of that, different rules apply. So similar to the use strict rules, for instance, this context of a function will be undefined if it's a module, or it will be the global scope if it's a script. So that's fine, but the problem is that if I want to load a ES6 module, and I want to be able to load both common JS modules and ES6 modules with the import syntax, which is what we want. Because if we don't do that, then we're going to have a real ecosystem split. So we need them to be interoperable. Or if I want to even require an ES6 module using the common JS require to bring that module in, then I need to be able to know whether it's a module or a script. And the problem is that the ES6 spec doesn't is ambiguous about how you detect whether something is a module or not. So you'd think, well, I'll just look for an import statement or an export statement. Well, the thing is that an ES6 module doesn't have to have either of those things, and then it looks exactly like a like a script module. So we have a problem. So initially the thought was, well, we need out-of-band data. We need some way of describing whether it's a module or not. So in browsers, they do script type equals module, but we can't do that in Node, obviously. So the currently accepted draft, which is at that link there, is to add a separate extension .mjs. So there's been quite a lot of community kickback against that idea using a separate extension. It kind of feels it feels wrong to me. I don't want to do that. The arguments against in terms of syntax highlighting and stuff like that, they're not strong arguments. It doesn't feel right. That's all I have. There's a competing goal called in defense of .js, which involves specifying the entry point for your module as either main or module. If you specify it as module, then it's an ES6 module. If you specify it as main, then it's a CJS module, and you can have both. But again, that's problematic because what if you want to load a file, like a .js file, how do you, and it doesn't have a package JSON, you don't know, then again, you're back in the same situation. So the author of Lodash and Bradley Meck, who's been sort of tirelessly working on finding a solution for this, they've come together and they've published this unambiguous JavaScript Gramma solution. And this is great. So all it is if a module, if you want to use an ES6 module and you don't want to export anything and you don't want to import anything, which is a real edge case, then you are required to add an empty export. As long as it has the keyword export, you can determine whether it's a CJS module or a ES6 module. So a CJS module, and then you basically try to parse it both ways. So first you run it through the script parser. So you say it's a script goal. Let's try running it through the script parser. If it comes across an import or export, it's going to throw. It's going to fail. The parser is going to fail. So then it will go, okay, it must be an ES6 module, and I'll run it through there. And then if that fails, there's something else wrong. So initially that was thought to be too difficult, too much, would take too many resources to do that. But if you add this one requirement to the ES6 spec, then it can be done very quickly and actually can be optimized. So I'm very, very much behind that solution. It doesn't even need to get into the ES6 spec per se because it's not forbidden, but it needs to be at least have the blessing of the TC39 before things move ahead. So it could be maybe a specific node extension to ES6, which is allowed according to the spec. So they're having actually a meeting in July. So I guess we'll know pretty soon about what the outcome is in the coming months. So I'm excited about that, and I'm excited about seeing the system move forward. I would be sorry to see the require statement go. I'm very fond of it. And when I initially saw the ES6 syntax, I was not happy at all. But nevertheless, we should embrace the future and we should move forward. And sometimes there's a culture shock that you have to get over. If they can solve this problem, then not only do we have interoperability between CommonJS and ES6 modules in Node, we also have interoperability between module loading in Node.js and the browser. Once the browsers get ES6 modules introduced as well, then we get more of that sort of full stack goodness that we keep embracing. So that's sorry, that was a long stretch, wasn't it? So we're currently over. Apologies, we love to talk, but we'll certainly take some questions in for 7 minutes or so. Luca, what questions do we have?
I think there's an interesting question about. Somebody is asking actually. If you could repeat the name of the website where you can retrieve all the stats about your npm package, and that's
npm-stats.com.
Yeah, you can open the browser.
Yeah, I'm actually in the browser. So how do I get out of this? Okay, npm-stats.com, and you can search for a user or you can search for a module. Actually, going to search for a module I searched for earlier because I'm really happy with it. So that's a module I wrote called Fast Safe Stringify. It's not been around very long, but 20,000 downloads, yay! So that's a cool tool for that. Another thing that you're going to want to look at is so let's say go to Express. You'll always find frameworks have more downloads and more things depending on them because they're frameworks, right? So here's Express. Taking a look at the dependents is a great way of sort of gauging, the trust that's in that module. If people are using it, and a lot of people are using it, and a lot of well-known projects are using it, then you have a good indicator of trust. In fact, I trust that metric more than downloads. Another thing to think about is when you're looking at the download stats, you have to be aware of the context of what it is. Is it solving a niche problem? Because if it is, it's not going to have a huge amount of download stats. Is it a tool? Because if it's a tool, then it's going to have the downloads are more indicative of actual tool usage, not whether it's being used as a subdependency of a subdependency of a subdependency. Yeah, that answers that question and more, I think. Any other questions?
Yeah, that's also something pretty interesting. About security, do you know any nice tool or website or whatever you can use actually to announce security auditing in your application, which is actually great for enterprise, right?
Yeah, we were talking about this, weren't we? What was the name of that? Was it Spit?
Yeah.
Spit.io.
Yeah, that's a great one, actually. It basically can connect with your GitHub repo, and it can basically show from the vulnerability database all the kind of vulnerabilities that are affecting the different packages, right, that are around. So that's actually a kind of great place where to basically see.
Oh, and it can test the package as well.
Yeah, correct.
Very, very cool.
Yeah, and it also has a pretty UI, so that makes it even better, right?
Yeah, very cool.
That is, we also have another alternative, right, for security.
The Audit.js you're talking about? We mentioned that?
Yeah, correct. Audit.js is another alternative to use basically the national security database to check.
Yeah, the National Vulnerability Database, nodeschool.io, and then NPM announcements as well. But it doesn't include this vulnerability database, so I guess use them in tangent. Ultimately, though, these tools, only give you a heads up for things that have been reported. If you're going into production with something that's critical, with something that's mission critical, it's really, really important that someone competent looks through the dependencies and even read. I would go as far as reading the dependency source code of your dependencies, which is a big ask, and also obviously pen testing. I mean, got to get the pen testing in. Awesome, Luca. I saw a question come through. It was actually about your hair. Someone asked, how do you do your hair?
Well, I could not actually find any NPM package for that. So I tried to look for an NPM package, but that would require a lot of manual work, which is actually what I never promote in development. I usually am for automation, but this time I have to admit I could not script it out. So it's kind of manual job every morning, repeated. I'm actually trying to robotize it, so I'm thinking about how to. I couldn't find any script. Ansible or with an NPM, they still cannot fix the problem of my hair every morning.
I think a robot that does your hair. I think we're onto something.
Yeah, maybe a monster.
Yeah, we should definitely write it in JavaScript too. Nothing can go wrong.
Definitely make your hair .js.
All right, cool. Well, let's. If anyone has other questions, we're sorry if we didn't get to your question or whatever, but sure, ping me, ping Luca on Twitter. We'll continue this discussion there. If you want to talk to us about anything else, feel free. You can PM us as well. Obviously, as we said, well, we can only really cover surface concepts in a 30-minute talk. So, as we said, NearForm do provide training. We provide consultancy, code development, all of that. Get in touch. hello@nearform.com. But yeah, anything else? Hit us up on Twitter. We'd be happy to talk and hopefully start a dialogue on whatever you want to talk about. All right. Thanks everyone for watching. We hope you enjoyed it, and do stay tuned for more free live talks in the future.